Good evening, great souls, and welcome. We are soon to be ready to start here. You can join us in meditating for a few moments while we finish our setup. Good evening, great souls. Welcome. We'd like to begin this evening's commemoration of Swami Kriyananda's life with a prayer together. Please join me in praying. Divine Mother,
Divine Mother,
Heavenly Father,
Heavenly Father,
beloved friend God,
beloved friend God,
great Masters,
great Masters,
Jesus Christ,
Jesus Christ,
Babaji Krishna,
Babaji Krishna,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Lahiri Mahashaya,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
Swami Sri Yukteswar,
beloved Guru,
beloved Guru,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
Paramhansa Yogananda,
saints and sages of all religions,
saints and sages of all religions,
beloved Swamiji,
beloved Swamiji,
we invoke your presence,
we invoke your presence,
your blessings
your blessing
this evening.
this evening.
Help us to be ever more in tune
Help us to be ever more in tune
with Guru's grace
with Guru's grace
and divine love.
and divine love.
Flow through our lives.
Flow through our lives.
Om. Peace. Amen. We'll begin with one chant that Swamiji would, especially in his later years, was kind of his chant of choice, Door of My Heart. And then we'll have a brief meditation. And then we wanted to show a lovely short video presentation of Swamiji's life. It's just photos, but beautifully collected and arranged. And we'll do that after a chant and a short meditation. My heart open wide, I keep for you. Door of my heart open wide, I keep for you. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day, night and day. I look for thee, night and day. Door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. Door of my heart, open wide, I keep for thee. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Wilt thou come? Wilt thou come? Just for once, come to me. Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Will my days fly away without seeing thee, my Lord? Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. Night and day, I look for thee, night and day. My heart, open wide, I keep for thee. just meditate briefly. So we'll begin this video presentation now. Give us just a moment to get this set up. And you might go change the camera. You'll have to lower it.
Do you have the?
Yeah. Is that in good position now? I hope you all could see that and enjoy it. So we wanted to chant, talk.
We can tell some stories.
Okay, all right. Do you want to go first?
Sure.
Okay.
So, well, Swami Kriyananda was definitely the most important person in our lives for many, many years. I came to Ananda in 1975, and in 78 or 9, Swami took a nationwide tour across America with a small singing group, and I was part of that singing group. We went all over America and up into Canada, and I think we were gone for maybe 3 months. So it gave me a lot of time to get to know Swami as much as one could know a human dynamo. He was a very powerful person, very full of energy. And when we came back from that tour, he sent a small group to Palo Alto, or maybe that was later. At any rate, I became his assistant in the early 80s for some years. Then in about 82 or 83, he asked me to come back and co-direct an ashram house in Grass Valley. And we also had a little church there. It was a beautiful scene. Anyway, then after that, I became his personal assistant, and we worked on slideshows and music, programs outside in the summer at Crystal Hermitage, and just a general assistant for all sorts of things. So I have many memories. It's hard to know where to even start, but I think I'll jump ahead and just tell you some stories about when Swami decided to go to India in 2003. And he asked Dharmadas and I to go with him. We landed in India just right around Thanksgiving. And we were there until maybe December, January, when he decided to go to Kerala, to Cochin. December. And we went with Jyotish and Devi and Swami to the southern part of India for a little chance to get away, have a little break for him. He'd been working really hard. And while he was there, he started feeling unwell. And even though we saw a doctor there and tried to get some assistance, by the time he came home, he was very unwell. And we had installed a speaker system between his room and our room so that he could just say our names and we would hear him and come running. Or maybe there was a buzzer.
It was a bell. Yeah.
It was a bell. So one night in the wee hours, the alarm went off and we went scrambling into his room to see what was going on, and he could barely breathe. He's having a very difficult time. We called Dr. Peter. Dr. Peter said, take him to the hospital. So we called the ambulance, got him to the hospital. But the main memory that I have of it is that the ambulance guys came and they put him on a board and they sort of strapped him onto this board. And then we had this long stairway that went around in a circle, all these different floors going down to the ground. And all the people in the ashram, everyone who lived there, lined the stairway. We were all so concerned for Swami. And it was difficult to get this rectangular board down this stairway, and everybody helped. Everybody put their hands on that board. It was very precious cargo on that board. And, in the middle of the stairway was a deep stairwell. It was dangerous. So we very lovingly got him down and into the ambulance. And Dharmadas went to the hospital and stayed in his hospital room. And we would joke that he was Swami's protection against mosquitoes because mosquitoes love Dharmadas and they would just all go to him. So it was one of those times in the hospital when Swami would often tell this story. One of the doctors came in and said, here's Swami, he's feeling just terrible. And one of the doctors said to him, "Sir, can you help me?" And he proceeded to tell Swami about his difficulties keeping in Dharma because of the need for money for his family, his children going to college, and all of that. And Swami did the best he could in the moment to help that person, but it gave him the inspiration to write the Material Success Through Yoga Principles course. And he spent many months in India writing that course. And maybe I'll let you tell a story and I'll tell others.
I'll just begin by saying I was so touched and moved by that slideshow because the diversity and the breadth and length of his life. I mean, many people, I suppose, live to be 86, 87, but to have touched in such a deep way so many hundreds and thousands of people, it's just, I mean, I'm almost speechless, looking at who was there, the incredible souls in that. It's just really a gift. It was and is a gift to have known him, and um, an enormous challenge. Nirmala, sort of lightly glossed over the challenges of working around him because one of Swamiji's first music albums was called "Say Yes to Life," and you could sort of title the concept of working with Swami "Say Yes to whatever's next, whatever next challenge or opportunity he's presenting." And inevitably, those challenges were very real. And he would work with people who said yes. And he would not really work with people who didn't, or not very much, not as much anyway. So, it was a very self-selecting process. The to segue on to the story about India, he had double pneumonia at that point, and that's when the doctor came in and asked him if he could help, and that inspired Swami to write the Material Success course, as Nirmal was saying. What I was going to add is that writing that course was not easy for Swami. It took him 18 months, and he could bang out spiritual books. He could really write when it was a spiritual theme, but a material theme, he really had to put his mind in a whole different wavelength to not only to address the topic of material success at all, but to address it to an Indian audience, to an Indian consciousness, and of course, and beyond to the whole world, because the principles, of course, were universal. But that was quite a challenge. That was really his main project in the first, 18 months or so that we were in India. He was writing that course, and then he moved on to quite a number of other books. he had just finished, to set the stage for right before that, he had just finished writing Conversations with Yogananda. And so we were producing that book literally as we landed in India. In fact, we kind of took over this little guest house with about 20 rooms. We had only maybe 6 or 8 of the rooms, but we took over the dining hall, which was in the basement, and it sort of tripled. It was our dining room, it was our temple where we meditated all together, and it was the office where we created a publishing house and published 3 books in the span of 3 weeks in India, just out of the clear blue sky. I don't know what anybody made of us or that, but anyway, we did it. And that was just indicative. I don't know if you can remember, in the slideshow, there's a picture of Swami with his arms up like this, and he's looking up and he's got a big smile on his face. He must have been at a lecture, and I don't know what he was doing, one of the super conscious living exercises or something. But anyway, all his energy was going up. And that's kind of the story of his life. And it's just fascinating to see, even as a child in those photos, you could see that character. You saw I had the chance to look at these slides several times as I was getting them onto the computer and preparing it, and seeing him with his brothers. So he's got his brother Bob and his brother Dick, and just, you could see, even at a young age, they just had a different way of looking at life. And just fascinating, little, there's a vignette in there. He was kind of the leader of the energy just because he came in with that. He had that dynamic, very creative, very imaginative all through his life, but even as a child, very much so, and always creating games. He said he was amazed coming to America to see, how prominent television was, and how many things kids had, toys and games and this and that. He said, we just made up our games, whatever, we just created things. We'd create an adventure and they'd go off roaming in the fields and have this adventure, and they'd, decide what game they wanted to play anyway. It was just a beautiful image, but he really carried that creativity. This morning I walked around outside in the Babaji garden, and those of you who haven't seen the video that we posted, it's very simply called Beauty. And he had an eye for beauty from, I want to just say birth, or from other lifetimes, because he really he chose a family that had very refined sensibilities. They were interested in the arts. His mother was an accomplished violin player. He just, he had that expression from the beginning. He would tell that as a little child, he would climb under the table, and his mother had these very colorful tablecloths and colored blankets and so forth. And he would look out from under the table at the colors and the light passing through the colors. And he said he would go into a kind of ecstasy. And that, I have to say, and we, because moving to India was an enormous segue in our lives from working for him, which Nirmala had been doing for nearly 20 years at that point. I for much less, but we went from working for him and with him in a dynamic way to living with him. And so we got to be at fairly close quarters there, close enough that the doorbell rang in our room and we would zoom upstairs to his room. Or later, when we moved into the Guru Kripa house, our doors were like 12 feet apart. And again, the doorbell was there and it would go off and we'd go scampering in to see whatever he needed. But we could see his love for color. He decorated every place that we lived. he decorated it fresh, although the last one in Pune, Nirmala decorated, but um, largely from things that we could bring from other places. But he absolutely bathed in color. He loved brilliant, beautiful, sensitive color. And I think it reminded him of the astral world. And so in some ways, he was always, Master did some interesting things with him in this life. Swami had these very interesting elements. Those who know a little bit about astrology, he had an extremely challenging astrological chart, a grand cross in the fixed signs in Western, and that sort of gave a kind of an example of the challenges in his life. He was by nature very much a hermit, and yet Master gave him a very public role. He gave him a role of building the work outwardly, taking this work into new worlds, you know, across the world. He taught in many countries. He spoke 9 languages. He lectured in 5 of them. Um, those pictures that we saw of Italy, the first ones, he probably was speaking English. He spoke Spanish, French, German, Romanian, and English of the European languages. Later, he learned Italian. That was in the 80s when we began to build a work in Italy. But he spoke to huge audiences in Rome and other places in Italy in Italian, and very, very good Italian too. In fact, in one memorable example, a shopkeeper in Florence, I believe it was, complimented him on his English. If you sort of get the drift of where that's headed, he knew the other people were Americans, but what about you? Your English is amazing. Anyway, but he had this ability to try to reach. He not only had the ability, but he had the keen interest to try to reach people where they were, to try to address their needs, to address their consciousness. And he didn't wait for people to come to him, which he certainly could have done. And that would be more expressive of the hermit side of his nature, the seclusive, reclusive side of his nature. But Master got him out there, and he himself had this strong inclination, even as he was traveling across the country to meet Yogananda for the very first time. He was so thrilled by having read the book Autobiography of a Yogi, that he thought to himself, I want 2 things. I want to know God, to find God, and I want to share this with everyone. Everyone should know about this. Right away, he had those 2 thoughts. Now, it's sort of miraculous to even have the one thought, even to want to know God, even to want to have that kind of experience of God's presence. I mean, that's unusual in this world. But then to couple it with the desire also to share it with others, that was extremely unusual. And I think that's what Master could pick up on. And I also think Master picked up on the fact that they had been together in other lifetimes and that they had a long and deep relationship. And Master really cultivated that and really drew that out of Swamiji and encouraged it and really demanded it of him, because that was his path to freedom. And so Nirmala remarked once, and actually several times, that Swami Kriyananda had the personality of someone who was getting rid of a personality once and forever. He had enough of a personality, he had an amazing sense of humor, amazing intellect, amazing devotional nature, very human. I remember just for 20 years of knowing him, I remember basically being in awe of him and just a little tongue-tied and shy and kind of nervous around him, which wasn't very pleasant for him to have this person sort of a little bit quaking. I mean, especially when I was in my 20s, I just you know, his energy was just so huge and so positive and so focused and so everything. It was just like, wow, this is just a lot to take in. But as we worked with him and knew him longer and then later on lived with him, he just wanted to be a person. He had a role to play, a very dynamic, very public role, but he could roll up to the dais, to the stage for some of these public lectures like you saw pictures of in India and other places too. He could basically almost be carried to the platform and then stand and give an hour and a half lecture with full force and energy. Why and how could he do that? He could do that because Master was flowing through him, and it was no longer him. I mean, there was a Swami Kriyananda, there was a personality, there was enough ego to direct the project and energize it and make it happen. He was willingly pushing that forward and out into the world. But otherwise, left to his own devices, his body was failing in the last years of his life, which was very challenging for him. Those of you who only saw him in the last 10 or 15 or 20 years of his life, those were some tough years. And the years prior to that, in the 60s, 70s, and 80s especially, he had a dynamic energy, incredible creativity. We used to sort of tremble when he would go into seclusion or when he would go away and then come back, because inevitably the return was just this burst of creativity, and he'd start moving people and pieces and projects around, and it was just like, oh my God, what hurricane is going to blow into our world? And of course it was always wonderful, challenging, yes, wonderful also. Do you want to add something?
Go ahead.
No, I mean, just
Well, Swami is our favorite subject. We could go on and on and on. It's so many memories, so many sweet little things. When Dharmadas and I worked in his publishing company, I would make the covers for his albums and books, and Dharmadas would do all the typesetting and production of these pieces. And so we worked very closely together, and we would, if Swami was in Italy, we would stay up all night so that we could communicate in real time with him. And when he was in America, then we were just every day together a lot of the time. So we would do fun little things. Like one time he came home, yeah, I'm not sure the timing, but it was in the winter time at Crystal Hermitage in his apartment downstairs. If for those of you who can visualize and have seen that, you know that there's beautiful windows on two sides of the apartment living room looking out over the Yuba River far below and National Forest. It's absolutely beautiful. Well, his chair was sort of right in the corner, so he could just look right out the window. And even though it was cold weather, Dharmadas and I had found these very realistic looking tulips being his favorite flower. And we planted the tulips right where he could see them from his chair. And we lived for this look on his face of, are those real? And we got that look of, are those really tulips? It was very fun. And another time we found these little battery operated fish that were maybe this long, and their tails would move and they would swim around in the water, and we put a bunch of those in the swimming pool. And there was a nice dinner that night, and then Swami came out, and there were all these little fish swimming in the swimming pool. So we were sort of having fun. We like to have fun with Swami, and I'm sure those of you who have heard him read the P.G. Wodehouse stories know the just infectious joy of his laughter, and we lived to create that laughter. We loved hearing him laugh and making him happy. Want to tell another story?
This is a different vignette, also coming from India. His anniversary of discipleship is on the 12th of September each year, and in 1948 is when he took discipleship to Master and met him that first time, which was unprecedented, by the way, that someone took discipleship on the day that they met him. To my knowledge, that did not ever happen in the ashram there in Southern California. Anyway, in India, it's very traditional to commemorate significant events, birthdays, mahasamadhis, births, deaths, etc., of great souls or even family members. And in the newspaper, it's a very interesting way that newspapers work in India. Everyone reads the newspaper to this day. It's just, I mean, online things, I'm sure in the last 10 years have come up more, but newspapers are extremely cheap. They're like 5 cents for a big, huge newspaper. But the advertisements in that newspaper are very expensive because that's how they afford to have a newspaper. So we would see these advertisements, sometimes an entire page would be, grandfather so and so who started the such and such company. We honor his legacy. We honor his amazing life, his grateful family and company and whatever. And that ad would cost like $75,000, US dollars. And so we never had that kind of money. We could never afford to do something like that. But we wanted this one year. In India, they have a slightly different way of counting age. They will count it a year ahead. So when someone turns 19, they'll say he's entering his 20th year. They'll actually sort of call him 20. So what we would have called Swami's 59th anniversary of discipleship, which was in 2007, we were celebrating the beginning of his 60th year of discipleship. And we just felt like we got to grab the opportunities as they come. And so we designed an ad. It was not a huge ad. You can see my fingers here. It was about yay big, and it cost about $3,000. And we had not that kind of money to spend. And I remember we designed the ad, we reserved the ad, and then we went to our larger group of devotees and said, we need help to afford this. And it kind of came right down to the deadline, but some people stepped in and we got the donations and we put the ad in the newspaper. And I made sure on that morning I didn't want to leave it to chance. I wanted to be waiting when the newspaper came in the door, because Swami, when he would come down in the morning, would often reach for the newspaper, and Leela would make him a cup of tea, and he would have tea and read the newspaper. And I wanted to be the one to hand him that newspaper because I wanted to see his face when he saw it. And I did. And it was so sweet because the placement that we could afford was on page 3, which is a pretty good placement because front and back covers are just impossibly expensive. But page 3, as soon as you've looked at page 1, you open and boom, you're looking at page 3. So that's where we put that ad. And sure enough, he looked at the front page. Back page was sports. He wasn't interested in sports. He opened the thing and boom, there was the ad. And it was honoring his discipleship to Master. There was no commercial value in it whatsoever. It was just pure love and honoring his connection to Master. Every other Indian saint, sadhu, Swami, whatever, would have just dispensed with the discipleship part of the equation and just said, look, I'm the guru now, I'm the one teaching, etc. And Swami just never did that. He never formally wanted that kind of title attached to him. He wanted the energy and the attention to go to Master. And so we wanted to honor the fact that discipleship was so important and deeply, deeply what his example gave us throughout his life. And it was just very touching to see that. And it was meant a lot to all of us to honor that for him and in him.
Just to add a little bit about that period of time, Swami was making a lot of TV shows during that time. He would give a talk, read a passage from Conversations with Yogananda, and then he would talk about it. A group of singers would sing beforehand or maybe after the talk. And he did 365 of these things.
Several different 365s. Yeah.
Yeah. But the one I'm remembering, they were all testy just because his health was so uncertain. And he would set these incredible goals for himself to do X number of episodes every day. And it was very trying. But this one particular set of television programs, he finished them and we put a garland of flowers around his neck, just congratulating him, thanking him for this amazing effort that he had put out. And he graciously accepted it. And then he just sort of disappeared. And I happened to notice, because we were living in the same rooms, very close together. Our bedroom was just right across from his. And I saw him out of the corner of my eye, and he had taken that garland off and gone into his bedroom and laid it at Master's feet. He would never accept anything for himself. It was always just thanking God for the opportunity to serve Master.
I want to show a photo. This is one that I think could have been in the slideshow because it was related to the. I'm going to see if I can be the Zoom. Just show this and get it close enough that you all can see. This is Swamiji and Dr. Abdul Kalam, who was president of India. Sri Kartikeyan is on the left side of the picture next to Nirmala, who got the connection. And this is in 2006. And they had the sweetest connection, Swamiji and Dr. Kalam. They were both very well impressed with each other too, which is saying something because Swamiji was not easily impressed by political figures, certainly, and although Kalam was not really a political figure, doesn't campaign in India. It's more a ceremonial position, kind of like the Queen of England or something. But he just was so comfortable with the highest levels of society and of the culture, and just could absolutely move at that level so gracefully, so humbly, and yet very, very powerfully. Fascinating little sidelight to that. One of the comments that Dr. Kalam, president of India, said in passing to Swami, but while we were there, he said, "Maybe I will become your disciple." And it's like one of these things. I mean, who knows? Maybe in some future lifetime, he will actually fulfill that. Anyway, who's to say? It's just one of those little snippets that passed by. But Swami wrote, I mentioned that it took him 18 months to write the Material Success course. He wrote the essence of the Bhagavad Gita, which in many ways is his great work, really, to have captured the essence, the blessing, the grace of Master's commentaries in such a fluid way, in such a readable, dynamic way, all in the span of 2 months. He wrote it in 2 months, he edited it in about 3 weeks, and we produced it and launched it a few months later. And, at Siri Ford Auditorium in front of 2,000 people. Um, it was just amazing. And then just shortly after that, we met the president of India, and Swamiji was able to give him a signed copy of the book, and then launched it in America later on as well. But so many, many things came late in his life. It's really incredible to think. I mean, so many people get into their 60s, 70s, 80s, and they're, putting their feet up on the desk or the couch, whatever. And boy, Swami was just dynamically creative, always looking for the next way to connect and reach people in so many different countries and places. It's just really remarkable.
I often wonder what Swamiji would think about the times that we're living in and how he would react. And I think that he would he would be extremely creative, and he would not stop. He would just put out energy as much as he could all the time. That's how he always was when we were around him. We did a lot of creative projects together, and he was a, a volcano of energy and magnetism. I think that he would tell us to keep our faith very strong and to use this opportunity of self isolating and quarantine. He would use this opportunity for seclusion, going deep in loving God and being with God and trusting God. And he would say, this is a fantastic time, a great opportunity. Use this opportunity to strengthen your trust and your love for God. Go deep in meditation and do whatever you can to be creative. We have the little creativity while sheltering in place blog on our website. And it's just been a delight to see how so many people have sent in pictures of fixing the lighting in their gardening and putting in pathways and photographic slideshows and beautiful paintings and sewing projects and all kinds of wonderful things. When we are in trouble, we need to put out dynamic energy and make that the focus of our lives. I'm sure we've told this story before, but when Swami was embroiled in these awful lawsuits in the 90s, he endured something like 80 hours of um, deposition under very hostile circumstances. And he had the weekend off, and then he would have to go back into that scene. It was all happening in Palo Alto. He came home on Friday night, and you would think he would just collapse in the bed and just not come out until he had to leave for the Bay Area again. But no, he had us all ready, and he was going to record, and he did 3 albums, 3 albums of music over the weekend. That's the kind of person he was. He was not going to be bowed down by circumstances. We have to stiffen our spines and or become more flexible through yoga with our spines, but we have to find our spine, stay in there, and keep the energy moving up towards God. And that's how he would tell us to be during this time.
The 3 albums that he recorded were Kriyananda Chants Yogananda, Windows on the World, so that was chanting. Windows on the World was his own songs in English, and then An Evening in Italy, and those were songs in Italian. And all 3 of them just remarkably beautiful albums, beautifully recorded and arranged, and just pure creativity and pure devotion, really, when you think about it, to put out in that way.
So I just want to also add that whatever you feel of Ananda, whatever inspires you or gives you the opportunity to serve, to do something in the community, to give in whatever way, what you feel, that energy, the magnetism, the love, the joy that you feel, all of it comes through Swami. And behind him is Master. And behind Master is God. There's just that rushing flow of beautiful magnetism and love. And that's all from them. It's whatever you feel from any of the people or going into the temple, exploring the Babaji garden and the beautiful community we have here, Ananda Village, India, Italy, all the centers. It's all that. It's that loving, magnetic, energetic pull of the divine to bring you back to that state of consciousness, to that loving vibration of God. So accept that into your heart, feel that, bask in that, and try to give that too, because whatever we receive, we can't just hold on to it. We have to give in some way and just keep that flow going and share it with others.
Sorry, I guess my mic was off for part of the time here.
Oh dear.
I don't think I can give all that all over again. I was going to add something useful. Segueing on to what Nirmala was saying about all of this coming through Swamiji. Wherever we feel inspiration, we have to honor the source of that. And even though as a human being, Swamiji didn't really want personal, he didn't want it to become personal. He was very cautious. I mean, it was many years before he would get close to most people in a personal way, in a human way. He sort of had to see that they would also be impersonal with themselves. He would often kind of challenge people in that way, that they not relate to him on such a personal level that it kind of devolved down to a lower common denominator. But as long as it could stay up on that level, he could be very, very charming and human. And, as I said, the incredible sense of humor, just so off the beat. I mean, I just remember howling sometimes with laughter. I mean, I remember this one time he had gotten a little bit overweight in the early 1980s, mainly because his hips were coming apart and he needed to get both of them replaced, and he was really struggling to walk. It was enormously painful for him. But anyway, um, during a lecture one time at Expanding Light, he said, well, as you progress in the yogic path, your stomach muscles become a little softer, as you do pranayama more. And then he sort of paused, and then he started chuckling, and he said, it's amazing the degree some people will go to justify themselves. And he just cut loose laughing at himself, basically. And everybody just completely lost it. It was so sweet and just so adorably, he was very willing to make himself the brunt of the joke at times, just to keep people loose and keep them in their hearts so that they could receive whatever he was trying to give and share. And anyway, just what a joy. So
Just wanted to mention that chant that we played at the beginning, Door of My Heart, is one that Swami wrote the chords for, and he also wrote 3-part harmony to go with these chords. So it's the only chant that's that orchestrated by him. But it was definitely one of his favorites. And in later years, he had trouble playing the harmonium because he couldn't hear well enough, and it was very difficult to play. And so he would often ask me to play that chant, or Dharmadas to play. And just so sweet. I remember, the virus, you lose your sense of taste and smell, and Swami lost his sense of taste and smell to a large degree. He couldn't hear very well. His hearing got very, very difficult at different times. And we would joke, he'd say, well, lose every sense is cutting down, shutting off one by one, but I still have my sense of humor. And we have to keep that. Everything else can go, but we have to keep that sense of humor. It will serve us well. And he often had that gallows sense of humor, but even to the last few days of his life, he had a P.G. Wodehouse book, and his bookmark was in there, and he was reading P.G. Wodehouse to try to keep the joy level high, even when he was in a lot of pain and going through a lot of trouble. So he's a wonderful example for us on many, many levels.
Master had said to him much, much earlier, back in the late 40s or early 50s, that God would come to him at the end of life, and that death itself was the final sacrifice he would have to make. And we all kind of thought that meant he was likely to have some very dramatic death, a martyrdom even. I mean, we really didn't know. India can get to be kind of a spicy place, especially when spirituality gets into the mixture. Things can get kind of intense. And being such a public figure, he was on television every day for years and years and years. We would just walk down the street and people would recognize him and, come up to him and ask for an autograph, or just try to talk with him, touch his feet. I mean, sometimes he could hardly even proceed wherever he was trying to go. There were so many people sort of lined up because they recognized him. So we didn't know, if there was going to be some dramatic end. But in retrospect, how I would understand that statement of Master's is death itself was the final sacrifice that he had to make, because he was not allowed to have personal control over it. He was not allowed to sort of know that it was going to be right now. I mean, I think in the days prior to, he did know. He didn't let on very much, although, he dropped hints. But, he had been told that in prophecy that he would live to be 91, and he was almost 87. So, I mean, most everyone around him had this notion that there were still years to go. And he had been so near to death so many times. I mean, and the thought of losing him, Nirmala was telling the little vignette that happened early in our days in India when he went to the hospital with pneumonia. I mean, he actually said to me, I was the first one to go up there when the doorbell rang, and his first words to me were, "Dharmadas, I think I'm dying." And it was like, oh my God, I felt like dying. I mean, just to hear that. So, people around him thought, well, okay, we have more years, because after all, he's been to death and back a whole bunch of times, and Master can always bring him back if he really wants him to be with us. So he will. But then it was time for him to go. And I think that too was Master's grace to lift him out of a body that really was failing. I think he had taken on tremendous karma, just taken on the energy of building that work in India was an enormous commitment. And it took a lot out of him. And so I think, came a certain point, and it was Master's grace to just lift him out of the body, because he was really struggling to function even day to day at that point. But it's just a real blessing to share these thoughts and, reminisce a little bit on a human level. But let's just remember, his life didn't end when that body went into the casket. That life lives inside of us. And that energy that he gave is still working through our hands and our hearts, to the extent that we are open to it and use it and really try to offer it out into the world. And I feel like we should sing another chant here.
I want only thee.
Okay. So we'll sing I Want Only Thee, Swamiji's chant. Thee, only thee.
Door of My Heart was one of Master's chants, and this was written by Swami. I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. 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 I want only thee, Lord, only thee. I want only thee, Lord, thee, 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 only thee.
Let's do Fill My Body with the Sound of Om. We'll chant, fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om.
Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om.
Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill my spirit, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill my body, fill me with the sound of Om. Fill me with the sound of Om. Fill me with the
words to this very ancient Sanskrit chant. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Sri Yogananda, guide to inner freedom, steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Steal into my heart of hearts, banish my delusions. Let's close now by feeling the vibration of Swami Kriyananda, seeing the pictures of his youth, his energy, his humor, his joy as a child. Even in that small form, clearly his own vibration and energy so beautifully manifest. And let's see Ananda's channeled through him, through Master, by the will of God, to bring joy and peace and inner freedom to many, many souls throughout the world. Let's offer our love and gratitude that this energy has come into our lives, helping us, freeing us from delusion, helping us to draw closer to God. And let's offer that joy, gratitude, and love out in blessing to all the world, so that all those who need this light, this peace, this divine love may feel it in their hearts and in their minds. Let's rub our hands together and chant Om in blessing. Om. 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 Dharmadas, would you lead a prayer?
Let's close now with a prayer together. Divine Mother, Heavenly Father, friend, beloved God, great masters, beloved Guru, saints and sages of all religions, and our beloved Swamiji, we ask that your grace, your love, flow through our lives to heal and harmonize and bless others, that they may also feel divine joy and peace in their lives. Om. Peace. Amen. God bless you all. If you missed the slideshow at the beginning, it's also on YouTube separately from Ananda Village. And so you can look for that. I think it's just called Slides of or Selected Photos of Swami Kriyananda. God bless you all.